Everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read of First We Kill All the Lawyers by Seelie K. Chapter 1, A Refusal for Love. Donovan Trait whipped off his designer trench coat and with a quick smile at the judge, nearly draped it over the bar, separating the galley from the court. He adjusted his cuffs, smoothed his suit coat, and tweaked a crease in his slacks. Then his lips curled up into a grin. "My apologies, Your Honor," he said with a classic artistic flair, just a hint of a British accent clipping his vowels. The elevated commuter train was held up by some unfathomable crisis, he shrugged. I thought that would get me across town faster than a cab, but once again I was proved wrong. I've been on trains across the Midwest, delayed by cows or sheep, even though occasion misguided commuter, but the L just leaves me flummoxed. It seems to stop whenever, for only God knows whatever reason. Donovan brushed a lock of his hair off his forehead and smirked. My paralegal calls them L farts. Those in the courtroom chuckled. The judge, however, scowled. Shirley Magnuson narrowed her clear blue eyes and pointed her gavel at Donovan. Why do you think you were late because you were forced to tear yourself away from the arms of some blonde bimbo providing you with afternoon delights? Her stern gaze swept his body. Then she chuckled and shook her head. She patted her blonde hair pulled back into a neat bun, and her ruby red lips rewarded him with a sly smile. Not sure why you were named one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors. I don't see the attraction at all, but your many tricysts are no excuse for being late to court. She pointed her gavel at him. Don't let it happen again. Do- Donovan placed a hand over his heart. Your Honor, you wound me. I merely got a little late start this morning, and I have been unable to catch up. Please be assured that I hurried to this court in great anticipation of. District Attorney Wallace J. Sullivan cleared his throat. Your Honor, must the rest of us be subjected to this bull, um, mar- marlicky? Unlike defense counsel, I take my job seriously, and I would like to proceed. I have defendants to hang, witnesses to fry, he chuckled, and I so enjoy inflicting my legal prowess on Attorney Trait. He plucked at his arm of his suit coat as if removing a piece of lint, a smile blooming on his face, like taking candy from a baby. Judge Magnuson nodded. All right, let's begin. She gestured toward Donovan. Counsel Trait, I believe you have a motion or two? Donovan winked at her. Of course I do, Your Honor. Where would you like to begin? The judge rolled her eyes. At the beginning, counselor. Now get on with it. Unlike the L, this court has a schedule, and we stick to it. Donovan bowed his head in deference. Of course, Your Honor. He pulled a legal pad from his briefcase and studied it for a moment. Then he gazed at the judge, a slight smile crossing his face. Your Honor, I move for a complete dismissal of the charges against my client, with prejudice, of course. Judge Magnuson frowned. On what grounds? Donovan shook his head, trying to appear dismayed. Sadly, Your Honor, on the grounds of illegal search and seizure, a violation of the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and Article 1, Section 6 of the Illinois State Constitution, which states. The judge waved her hand. I know what it says, counselor. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Of course, Your Honor. The police had no arrest or search warrant when they broke down my client's door. They didn't even have probable cause to enter. The entire conversation before entering the premises revolved around whether their search warrant would come through in time to conduct a legal search. They also failed to knock and announce before entering. Instead, they just barged in and seized everything they could. The DA huffed and muttered, He's making that up. Donovan went back to his briefcase and pulled a rectangular device. He held it up for the judge to see. It was all recorded on my client's doorbell, Your Honor. This little doorbell has sound and sight capabilities. I believe it's called a ring. My client called me while the police were discussing their options. I advised him to let them implicate themselves. I also told him to demand a warrant, and when they couldn't produce one, to deny them entry. Sullivan jumped to his feet. Your Honor, we were not made aware of this evidence. In a haughty tone, he added, Besides, you cannot record people without their permission. That evidence is inadmissible. The judge scowled and peered over her reading glasses at the district attorney. Nice try, Wally. Security tapes used to prove or disprove an alleged crime are always admissible, and you know it. Now let the counselor proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. Donovan approached the bench and handed the judge a document. As this transcript reviews, the police knew where they were entering illegally. He walked over to Sullivan and tossed a copy to him. Then the district attorney attempted to cover his blunder by claiming the evidence they seized was in plain sight, rendering this seizure legal. Donovan turned toward the judge and scratched his head. I don't know where our esteemed DA studied law, but at Harvard we were taught that an illegal entry makes anything seized thereafter the fruit of a poisonous tree, which means, of course, all that evidence used to arrest and indict my client was inadmissible, and that means none of the resulting charges can stand. I respectfully request dismissal of all charges against my client with prejudice. Donovan gazed at the district attorney with an expression stern. I also ask that all evidence seized illegally be returned to my client forthwith. Donovan removed another sheet of paper from his briefcase. My client's wife recorded every single item seized. Not only did she manually maintain an inventory, but it also verified with an in-home security camera. We will consider any cash or valuables missing from that inventory to have been the subject of theft at the hands of the police or the DA's office. He handed the list to the judge and smirked. My client will not stand for sticky fingers, Your Honor. He will sue for a full recovery. Donovan folded his hands in front of him and shook his head. Sadly, Your Honor, this is not the first time the police and the district attorney have violated my client's rights. I fear the time has come for legal action. We have every intention of filing a lawsuit for malicious prosecution, police abuse of power, and false arrest. He sighed dramatically. The citizens of Chicago, the residents of Cook County, do not deserve a police force riddled with corruption and abuse. They have every right to expect untainted justice. The corrupt actions of a few threaten the freedom of many. We must put a stop to it. Sullivan jumped to his feet. Your Honor, that's slander. Donovan shook his head. It's not slander if it's true, my good sir. He cocked a well-tended eyebrow. Prove me wrong. The judge cleared her throat, and Donovan brought his attention back to her. His eyes swept her womanly charms. Judge Magnuson appeared particularly fetching after a night of. He shook his head and mentally scolded himself for such impure thoughts. Donovan executed a courtly bow. Thank you for your time and consideration, Your Honor. I am confident that you will grant justice where justice is due. Donovan pulled his head out from under Judge Shirley McCune's robe. Shirley slumped back in her majestic maroon office chair and smiled. It was the smile of a sexually sated woman. She sighed with contentment. My God, Donovan, that tongue of yours could play a concerto on a violin. Where did you learn to do that? Donovan absently stroked her creamy thigh. Years of practice, my dear. He smiled and stood. Let's move to the sofa, shall we? You are more than ready for my manly instrument, and believe me, it is more than ready for you. Shirley giggled. She stood up and removed her robe, daintily hanging it on a coat tree. As she walked toward Donovan, she removed the pins from her light blonde bun and shook out her hair, the curls cascading around her shoulders. Then she kicked off her shoes and unzipped her dress, allowing it to drop to the floor. Donovan sat up straighter on the couch and smiled. My God, woman, I love it when you dress like a dominatrix at a kink club. He studied the tight navy blue corset with white lace and pink bows and purred, you look simply delicious. He yanked her onto his lap and kissed her. His hands dug into her hair and he grasped it by the roots, pulling her mouth more tightly against his. His tongue drove into her mouth and coaxed hers into an erotic dance. He moaned, you are going to be the death of me. He nibbled her neck and then moved to her ear and bent down. Shirley jerked away. Damn it, Donovan. That hurt. I think you drew blood. Donovan fought the lust that threatened to flood his mind. A taste of the judge's blood was so tempting. He tightened his lips over the incisors that threatened to emerge as fangs. He didn't dare expose his true nature to a woman such as Shirley. He lapped at her ear and moaned again. I need to be inside you, darling, or I shall explode. He yanked at the corset and tore it from Shirley's body. Hey, I liked. Shh, my dear. I need to get inside you. I must feel your velvety softness squeeze my manly pride. He gently pushed Shirley back on the couch and parted her thighs. He took another look. Then Donovan stood and removed his belt. He unzipped his pants and exposed his rigged cock. So beautiful, Shirley breathed, her voice reverent. Please, please. Without a word, Donovan wrapped her legs around his waist and plunged inside her. He thrust artfully, rhythmically, ramping up Shirley's arousal until she screamed his name. Her eyes rolled up into her head and she collapsed onto the sofa, her limbs loose with no obvious strength. Slowly, Shirley smiled and opened her eyes. Oh, Donovan, she cooed, that cock of yours is magic, pure, unadulterated magic. Donovan grinned. Why, thank you, my dear. Always a pleasure to be of service. Shirley smiled. Of course, after last night, you conflicted yourself out of my courtroom. I didn't have time to act before your appearance this morning, but I will have to recuse myself during this, well, whatever this is. I will be forced to pass your case off to another judge. Of course, my dear, I would expect nothing less. He gazed at her and affectionately stroked her arm. I would never compromise your integrity like that. We must ensure justice is secure, despite our other pursuits. Shirley's eyes narrowed. Unless your skillful seduction last evening was planned, did you intend to force me to recuse myself that you might find a more amenable judge? Donovan chuckled. Judge Magnesian, I find you entirely delectable and utterly irresistible. If you will recall, I arrived at that soiree with another woman on my arm. It was only after our eyes met and the heat between us almost scorched the carpet that I was forced to invite you out for a quick drink. I was not even aware you were the judge assigned to this matter until the schedule was posted early this morning. Motion Motions hearings are always a crapshoot, you know that. It's simply too late to request a change of judge. He gazed at her, his fingers playing with her silken hair. Now that our attraction has been established, however, I think we need to plan for the long term. I have no intention of ignoring our rather explosive chemistry. Shirley's smile was tentative. Explosive chemistry, yes. However, I should warn you, I don't share. Donovan grinned. And despite my reputation to the contrary, neither do I. Chapter 2, A Sneak Attack. Donovan raced down Michigan Avenue, his brain shutting out the sights, sounds, and smells that pierced his sensation enhanced mind. Sometimes it sucked to be a vampire, especially in this century. 100 years ago, the world was still a relatively quiet place. The streets weren't cluttered with honking cabs, noisy trucks with smoke producing diesel engines, and people engaged in loud and mostly inane conversations. And the smells, ye gods, between the perfumes, colognes, food trucks and eateries, the dog parks and industrial pollution, This new world stank. It was no surprise that many of his kind isolated themselves in their homes, shut away from the world and overstimulation of the senses. Some days the smells alone were too much to bear. Thank you for listening to this portion.